Okay, thank you, Councillor. My name's Sophie Glendinning. I'm a resource consents planner at Origin, and next to me is Darcy Britliff, who's a director at Origin, and we've been engaged and are also part of the Tower Business Group to essentially make a submission on their behalf on the draft district plan. Just to my right is also Bernadette Pallister, who's part of the chair of the Tower Business Group.
Hi,
If we could have the slides up, Damien, that would be great.
Yeah, so as Darcy speaking here, so I'm also the chairman of the Tower Business Group. So the first two slides are to introduce a little bit about who we are and what we're about, and that adds a little bit of life to our submission. So Sophie introduced herself. She's the planner that the business group has engaged to prepare our submission. Bernadette is our bid manager, so she's located in Tawa and is boots on the ground engaging with the business owners in our area. And obviously I'm here as chairman. So if we could have the next slide please. And so who are we? We're what we call our business improvement district, and it's an area, a spatial area, which we'll show you in a second. But and within that area, it's a mutual partnership between the local authority and the businesses within that community. And the aim of it is to develop projects and services that align to the objectives of the Wellington City Council, but also they benefit that environment of the business centre. So our bid is supported by a targeted rate, which is levied on the non-residential properties within a defined boundary. So the next slide, please.
Thank you, Damien.
Okay, Bernadette.
Thanks, Darcy. So the Tower Business Group has various members. We've got 74 property owners and over 175 business owners, and they represent the membership. They've got within the bid area, so it's going right to the north up to the Tower Junction, through to the south down to Countdown. So your next slide please, Damien. So we've engaged with our members over the last few months. We do this on a number of different ways. We send out a newsletter to our members every other month, and we've also recently had two focus groups, one with our property owners and one with our business owners. And that's enabled us to gather together their views, which we then put into our submission, which raised the 7 key points that we've got through our consultation. So thank you, Damien.
So why are we here? Well, members of the Tower Business Group agree that updating the district plan is the perfect opportunity to achieve controlled growth in Tawa, and they want to be involved in that process. Members also feel that Tawa has several attributes that make it ideal for the right kind of intensification, including 4 train stations, a wide range of business sectors, strong local leadership with working relationships between the community board, the residents association and the business group. Next slide please. So in terms of feedback from our engagement with members, sustainable growth was a recurrent theme, and I'll just touch on a couple of the challenges members see in being able to achieve this and some potential solutions. So firstly, the draft district plan proposes intensification within and beyond the boundary of the business improvement district by permitting increased building heights within the various zones. So whilst intensification is generally supported, members express concerns about intensification occurring before adequate community facilities and open space and increased capacity in wastewater and stormwater infrastructure has been realised. We felt a solution to this could be a phased approach to development, which could be achieved through a structure plan in order to achieve a balance of growth and amenity. Members also felt there needs to be a long-term strategy for traffic and transport as it relates to Tawa, to ensure that the existing traffic congestion, which is already a problem on Main Road, isn't worsened as a result of the proposed intensification. With more people living in Tawa, access to public transport should also, we feel, be improved with links to walking and cycling paths. And similarly, on-street parking within the town centre area is subject to high demand, and therefore consideration should be given to increasing capacity of park and rides at train stations and increasing availability of public car parks. Members were also concerned that existing infrastructure doesn't have the sufficient capacity to support the level of proposed intensification, but they do support the use of design guides to assess new development in local centre and medium density zones. Next slide, please. The final point from me, staying on the theme of infrastructure, many of the areas where intensification is proposed within the draft district plan are also subject to flood hazard overlays. So as illustrated in the photo on this slide, Tawa already experiences problems with flooding, and therefore members are interested to understand what council is doing to address this in the context of increased density, which will put additional pressure on existing infrastructure. And next slide, thanks.
So just to wrap up, we want to propose district plan that provides structured development that can be supported by infrastructure in our Tawa community. And that will, in our view, provide a vibrant local centre with lots of character, good quality buildings and developments, and a thriving business community. So we are seeking collaboration with Wellington City Council in the process of establishing the proposed district plan from here. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we go on to the next person, can I just ask Anna, is a structured development plan somewhere in the draft district plan at the moment, or is that a new concept to us?
We have the development areas for the greenfield, for example, in Glenside Stebbing, but we don't, as far as I believe, have one for Tawa.
Okay, thank you. All right. We've got Chessa Stevens and Cherie Jacobson. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kia ora koutou, my name's Cherie and I'm here with Chessa, who will introduce herself further in a moment. So I'm wearing a few hats today. I'm the director of Catherine Mansfield House and Garden, which is a historic house. That's my clock. Historic House and Writers Museum in Thorndon. I'm a Wellington resident whose house in Karori is a proposed addition to the schedule of historic heritage buildings in the plan. And with Chessa, I'm here on behalf of a group of Wellington heritage professionals who also made a submission together on the draft spatial plan. So first of all, on a personal note, I just want to affirm the support of myself and my partner for the addition of our house at 117 Campbell Street in Karori to the schedule of historic heritage buildings. The Halberstam House was built in 1948 for a family of Czech refugees who came to New Zealand during the Second World War. It was designed by Czech architect Henry Kulka, who was also a refugee and an internationally important modernist architect. Heritage isn't just pre-1930s, of course, and like many great examples of historic heritage buildings, it tells an important architectural story and a social history story. The grandson of Henry Kulka is thrilled to see the house included because many of the houses designed by Kulka in Auckland have been essentially ruined by various alterations over the years. So taking that hat off, in terms of our group submission, I'm going to mention a couple of our key points and then hand over to Chessa to round our introduction off. So on a general note, we believe that Wellington can achieve increased housing supply, affordability, and being a zero carbon city while still protecting heritage buildings, structures, areas and sites of significance to Māori. Intensification and heritage protection are not mutually exclusive. Some of us have been really distressed to see this conversation reduced to a black and white, often generational, battle of intensification versus heritage. Intensification happens all around the world. It's not something Wellington is grappling with alone. It's been happening for decades. And we were interested to note that many of the cities that have been profiled in the Dominion Post's Reimagining Wellington series for their desirable transport, urban planning, or housing also have strong heritage values, for example, Copenhagen, Seville, and Graz. Heritage protection isn't absolute, but a trigger for careful consideration, because of course, once it's gone, it's gone. So our first key point is that we really encourage the council to undertake some proper engagement to find out what Wellingtonians value in the heritage space. It's not clear what decision-making process was undertaken to come up with the proposed additions to the schedule of heritage items, as there's been no prior widespread consultation. In one section of a draft district plan consultation supporting document, it says we're accepting nominations for new heritage listings, include your nomination in your submission. But we think there needs to be more proactive widespread engagement, as only people who've engaged with the draft district plan submission process, which is about 4.4% of Wellingtonians, are even possibly going to see that note. So we'd like to see more engagement with Wellingtonians about what they value in the heritage space, encourage proposals of places, not just individual buildings, that are important to them to ensure that the list ultimately actually represents what people think in the city should be protected. This approach will promote social cohesion because it will paint a picture of what Wellingtonians collectively value about our built environment. It will highlight what should be protected and what isn't so important, and we might all be surprised at what we learn. So over to Chisa.
Kia ora koutou. So as Cherie mentioned, I'm Chisa Stevens. I'm a conservation architect. I practice here in Wellington, also across the country. And
Chisa, we can't hear you very well. Chisa, we can't hear you very well.
Yeah. Is that better?
A little bit.
Hang on. I'm not sure why it's not working.
Okay, you're better now.
Is that better? Oh, good.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Something I did work. That's excellent. So yes, I'm a conservation architect. I practice in Wellington, but also across the country, and I'm a Wellingtonian by birth, long term. And to build on some of those points that Cherie has started making on behalf of the group that prepared submission together, we have some particular concerns around the character area versus historic heritage and the way in which the proposed RMA amendments deal with that situation. So essentially the RMA amendments, they will enable housing intensification, as we're all aware, and they will require councils in greater urban areas like Wellington to intensify in ways that may undermine heritage and character values, specifically because the way that the reforming is worded is around heritage as being a reason why those intensification standards may not apply, but character is ruled out. And we have some concerns about the way in which the areas that have been formally recognised as character areas in Wellington are treated going forward, primarily because that distinction between character and heritage is fairly arbitrary, and our character areas, generally speaking, are significant because they have heritage values. And the extent to which those areas have been assessed recently is very reliant on architectural integrity, as opposed to relying on the overall character and the ways in which those buildings in an area contribute to an overall sense of historic heritage as a place, the context that those buildings provide to each other and the context that they provide within the environment in which they're located. And I think as Wellingtonians, we can all recognise that we see areas of place, areas where we have a high concentration of particular types of buildings that we value, rather than individual sites and individual buildings being those places that we recognise as iconically part of our community or iconically part of Wellington. So we believe that there is a more thorough analysis that really needs to be undertaken, looking at those former character areas, and also looking at some of the areas outside of what have previously been identified as character areas that have not really been fully assessed in terms of their potential heritage value, in order to ensure that we retain those really important urban environments that we have, such as through Thorndon, Āmua Valley, Cuba Street, Mount Victoria, just to name a few. We would also be interested to have a little bit of a discussion around resource consenting, although that's slightly out of the scope. We do think that there's some potential there for resource consenting incentives, especially around improving historic heritage to be retained and to enhance an overall shift in the psychological approach, that there's a distinction between, well, there's a black and white issue between heritage retention and intensification, and also that the RMA process or the district plan process gets in the way of development. This is the consenting process is an opportunity for heritage to be enhanced and greater value to be provided to the community, but it's also an opportunity to provide, by way of exemptions, for example, some financial incentives to assist the owners of historic buildings to do the right thing when it comes to retaining and enhancing the heritage values of our buildings throughout the city.
Thank you, Tessa. And so now we'll go to John and Jennifer Sullivan. Welcome.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko John rawa ko Jennifer Maua, noho ana hau Maua ki te Āmua Valley. Thanks very much for having us on. And we're John and Jennifer, we live in the Āmua Valley. I'll give you our situation. Our submission represents us, not any larger organisation. We live on a small house, very small house, built in 1895 out to the boundaries of a very small steep section in the Āmua Valley. We're very vulnerable to be shaded and overlooked, and we have mould built up. In addition, we have a son who grew up in this house, who now doesn't have the security of tenure which I enjoyed, and is currently finding it difficult to, to actually find a stable place to live. So we're aware of the situation from both sides. We have some concerns, which I'll just sort of enumerate now. We're concerned about the change in the relaxation in the regulations, which would allow structures 11 metres high in our street and 21 metres high on Āmua Valley, built out to the section boundaries for the following reasons. It could significantly reduce the amount of sunlight available in an already shaded and folded landscape. We have the issue of possible privacy issues in areas where houses are already built out close to the boundary. I can say that our hall window directly looks into the bathroom of the house next door, and we sort of live with that, but that's the kind of issue which you can have there. You could have the issue of piecemeal development. The area consists in the main of sections which are 100 metres or less, mostly privately owned and people in for the long haul. So that you could have pepper potted 3-storey high, 1-storey high, 3-storey high, and it seems to me the only options for a viable high-rise development would be if a developer was to gradually purchase adjacent sites as they became available, or if the council or the government was going to mandate a compulsory purchase scheme. We're concerned about the possible impact on the vegetation and bird life we enjoy. Currently, we have a flourishing native bird life. We have tui and kaka, which come down from Zealandia, and there's a network of gardens which allow tui and kaka a link with the city. And we'd like to be assured that more intensive building won't result in the breaking of this link. We're concerned about the obscuring of sightlines across the valley. It forms a natural amphitheatre, and you can see, from one side of the valley to the other, and this helps to build a sense of community. If you've got high-rise buildings on steep sections like this, you're going to break it up into a little series of canyons, and which basically breaks that overall sense of community. We are aware of the pressure on accommodation in Wellington, and we appreciate the need for more housing. The Āmua Valley is already intensively developed, but there's still scope for development, a subdivision on existing sections, and there are still undeveloped sites available. We support high-rise housing, but consider it's best suited to new developments on previously commercial or unoccupied land. That's where large plots of land can be acquired, making it possible to build entire communities in one project. The land's normally flat, shading and privacy are not such major issues, but they can be factored into the design and construction, and also all occupants start with shared expectations of what they can expect in those terms. And we note that the developments at 142 and 168 Āmua Street are an example of this. So we're not saying over my dead body. We recognise the need, but there are some issues which really need to be considered to make it viable for the people who are in here for the long haul as well. Jennifer, did you have anything that you... That's fine. That's it from us. Thanks very much.
I've got myself muted. Thank you, John. And now we'll go to Rachel and Michael.
Hello, everyone. You want me to speak? So I'll speak. So our concern is a mix between Chessa and Cherry and John and Jennifer. I'm an artist and I have my studio and gallery in Island Bay. We've been there for 19 years. And 2 months before the Christchurch earthquake, we bought the building to secure our ability to do business and have a gallery. It was a massive obligation for us because we had 3 young kids and we're making a living from art. So the Christchurch earthquake happened and our insurance skyrocketed massively, as did our stress and worry about owning a brick building. So now our building is on the heritage listing for the district plan. And while we love heritage, we have massive concerns. And mainly it is the conflict between owning a brick heritage building, which is 99 years old, and with the absolute massive financial obligations we have to secure it, and being heritage listed. So since we've owned it, our insurance has gone up to 14,000 a year. Each year we don't know if we're going to get it. Every couple of years we get new notifications saying that we have obligations to further strengthen our building. The work that was done in 1999 before we owned the building was massive work, massive portal frames around the building. They didn't count for anything. The engineers that we've talked to have not even ranked them as being valid. The big bolts going through the top of the building appear to not be valid to any engineer. They say, we don't know what these bolts are going to go into. So therefore, the strengthening done before we bought the building counts for nothing. 2-3 years ago, we were part of 113 buildings of the parapet and facade scheme. It was to do with aftershocks from the Kaikoura earthquake. We had to secure the parapet. We loved the scheme. We loved the communication of the scheme. We really appreciated how it was done. But we had a really bad engineer and who basically strengthened our parapet to 34%. We assumed it would go to 67%. It cost us $100,000. As I said, we got 3 young kids. This $100,000 was stuff we couldn't afford, even though the council and MB contributed 50% of this. We couldn't really work in the studio while it's been done. And now 3 years later, we have had a detailed seismic assessment done of the building. Every engineering firm we talk to, they say, look, the work we do to strengthen your building will not save the heritage of your building. It's only to save lives. And that will cost us probably, and I'm being conservative here, looks like about $500,000, and we're, if not more, because we're looking at what's going on with supply issues and contractors and everything. It will cost us a lot more than we can afford. The various heritage organizations will say, oh, there's funds there, but there aren't funds. There's no real fund. I believe, Rachel, it's $500,000 for all heritage buildings in the Wellington region at the moment. So this is the issue. On a lot of my paintings, I paint heritage, and I fully appreciate the need for heritage. But when it's set up against this constant talk of a magnitude 8 earthquake that's going to happen in our lifetimes, and how these brick heritage buildings, which contain mortar, which is 100 years old, made out of sea sand, you can't retrofit. Now, Chester, you probably have ways around this. Retrofit, steel into a building that will retain the structure of the building. I'm sure there's heritage architects who will say, absolutely, you can. You can strip the plaster on the building and wrap some kind of plastic coat around the bricks. Bottom line is that we can't afford to be lumbered with the liability of heritage listing and earthquake listing. And now on top of that, we were not quite on par with the reason why our building was heritage listed to begin with. It was based on immigration. So the Barneo family had it for 20 years as a dairy.
Basically, that was selected for heritage, not so much on the actual building, but the values it represented, which were migration, because Italian and Chinese families lived there.
Yeah. So Rachel and Michael, we just probably need to allow some time to go to questions. So could you just before we finish, could you just maybe just one last comment about what you'd like to see changed in the, or are you comfortable with the district plan?
Okay, we're not comfortable with the district plan. We don't want our building heritage listed because the cost to us and the inability to actually preserve the heritage values of the building should it fall down in a major earthquake is beyond our control. We can't afford it.
Okay, so that's your specific property. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Unlike a region in Wellington where Newtown or whatever has heritage values, it's one building at the end of Island Bay.
We think that the heritage values it's been selected for can be found elsewhere, as opposed to an earthquake-prone building.
Okay.
But it's got massive character values.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Look, we've got a question from Councillor Day.
I've actually got a few questions, but I'll start with one for Rachel and Michael first. I'm really sorry to hear about your experience. That sounds incredibly stressful. But I was interested, Rachel, you were just starting to sort of list off some of the values as to why it was heritage listed. And I am curious about that because I guess it gives us an indication as to, the impact that can have on other owners.
One is migration, because it used to be run as a grocery store, first by an Italian family, the Barneos, and later by 2 Chinese families. So it's representative of migration in Wellington. It's representative of transport, because it's at the end of the tram line. So, and it's a typical 2-story shop, which is representative of, well, I can't remember the word they used, but basically of the way people used to shop in the day. So, and the other one was arts, because Michael was an art gallery there. But we sort of think all of those things that can be found elsewhere in other buildings. And when we did ask the heritage officers, when they make their decisions, there's no weight given to the earthquake status of the building. So we sort of just think the cost benefit, the benefits you get, we think cost should be factored into. So we just sort of think earthquake should be on that list when you're choosing somewhere.
Thank you, that is really helpful. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, sure. You're the only one with the hand up at the moment, Jill, so the floor's yours.
So my other question is for Sophie and Darcy and Bernadette, and it's just around the flooding issues that you shared at the end. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts as to what we should be including in the district plan to be catering for that. We've got obviously some ideas on the table around water sensitive urban design and that sort of thing, but you probably had a bit more of a think about it, knowing the local community and what we should be thinking about.
Yeah, tough one to answer that, Jill. So obviously in the proposed district plan, it's the proposed draft, it's showing a blue layer, pretty much through the centre of Main Road Tava. So that's in direct conflict really with the other objectives of intensification. And so what we don't know, we're not quite visible, is what's currently planned by Wellington City Council and their advisors for infrastructure upgrades in Tawa to support the proposed intensification. So our proposal was to manage that in almost like a structured plan way, so that if there is an upgrade in a particular area that satisfies a risk, a flooding risk in an area, then that area can be allowed to develop first, and you stage that expenditure and the subsequent growth. So that was the only idea we had. We knew it's early days and there's probably lots of further discussion required on that point, but yeah, nothing else to add.
Thank you.
Did you? Okay. So just listening from the heritage things, do you, and Cherie and Chessa might be able to answer this for me, but I got a sense that you didn't feel that people were aware of the opportunity to heritage list the buildings for the district plan, or some people may not realise that their buildings were listed. I'm not sure whether that might be more from what Rachel and Michael was saying, but I just really want us to clarify that. Do you think people are aware that if their building is going to be on the district plan as heritage listing, that they will know that?
I can only speak to that personally as someone else whose house is being proposed to be listed. So we received something in the mail saying that it was being proposed to be listed, and obviously in our case we were happy about that, but other people may not have been happy about that.
Okay.
But our group submission point was really more broader in terms of how do we know what Wellingtonians feel is important to them in the heritage space if we haven't properly asked them? If in the submission process there's a thing saying you can nominate a building, very few people will see that, and I think it will tell us a lot about what Wellingtonians value about their built environment in their city, and I think it's an important values-based approach. So that was our broader point.
And I've got a general question for the group, and I've asked this in other sessions I've been at. How well communicated do you feel that the draft district plan has been communicated out there in the broader community? Any thoughts?
For our point of view from our building, it's very well communicated, and so I've been aware. It's possibly that's what's been making me follow it, so I can't, if I was coming in cold, I'm not sure.
And does anybody else have a view, thoughts?
We registered with the Planning for Growth website, so we've received quite regular updates, and been pretty well informed, I'd say. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's a bit hard for me because of work. I kind of keep an eye out for things like this, but I did feel that towards the end of last year there was a lot asked in terms of submissions. There was Let's Get Wellington Moving, the draft district plan. There seemed to be a lot of things, and for a lot of people who just don't have time in their personal lives to engage with that, there was a lot of submissions being asked for in the second half of last year. So whether people knew about it or not, hard for me to say, but it did feel like there was a lot being asked of people to engage with what can be quite a dense and confusing and technical document. So
I think that we were made pretty well aware, both by the news and also by our son, who was very much involved with matters in Thorndon. I think that when it comes down to specific, I share the concern that it wasn't entirely clear which plan you were speaking to and how all of those different plans and actually related to each other. The session in the Aro Valley Hall with the Aro Valley Council, with the Lambton councillors was very helpful there, and sort of giving us a steer on how we should go on in the future to engage with it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of each other or comments that you'd like to make? No, it doesn't seem to. Oh, Councillor Young.
So it's just a quick question for Michael and Rachel. I'm just curious at your street address, so I can look it up.
Oh, 355 Parade Island.
355.
Yeah.
It's down the end of the parade, just opposite the park.
Right. No, I knew vaguely because Mother Banea used to teach me, tried to teach me.
That makes it very heritage valued.
I'm heritage.
It's a difficult position because we are absolutely pro heritage and pro character, and it's just it's a red brick building with a 100-year-old mortar and
built on reclaimed swamp.
And
so, you know,
that's the issue. And we're told left, right, and centre that it's going to fall down. It's going to fall down. It's on liquefaction. It's going to crumble, and it's going to happen soon. Versus preserve it. And I come from Ireland, and I think New Zealand needs as much heritage and character as it can possibly get. It should preserve everything. And so I appreciate the irony.
Okay, Councillor Day.
It does leave me to ask the question. You know, obviously we'd love to, it'd be great to be able to preserve everything, but we live in a fairly compact city, and we know that there are lots of people at the moment who can't find a place, and there won't be space for everybody if we do keep everything. And I do agree there are some amazing, you know, heritage places that we do need to keep, but I also can acknowledge that sometimes we need to say goodbye. How do you think we do find that balance? Because it is hard, because there are people who'd like to keep everything and sort of be able to remember yesteryear, but you know, we do have to let some places go, I think. What do people think? I mean, it's sort of general to the room. How do we manage those conversations? Because it is really different for different people.
There needs to be a bigger fund. I actually think
if we value heritage, there needs to be funding to support it. Because at the moment there is, so far as we can see, next to no financial support. It's the onus is on the owners.
Yeah.
And so if Wellington as a whole wants this, I think Wellington and New Zealand as a whole needs to support it.
Yeah, because at the moment, honestly, how I feel is in my occupation is I'm painting for a living. Most people living in the fancy houses all around me are working in highly paid jobs, and now we're going to be lumbered with having a building that they can look at, and it's just, it needs to be supported financially if you want to preserve heritage. 500,000 is not enough. Far from it.
Okay, well, thank you. Look, thank you everyone for coming and sharing your perspectives and talking to your submissions. And I'm sure for one or two of you got some specific requirements, and I know we've got Anna here. We'll be noting those down. And so, look, thank you again once again for coming on, and we will be heading off to our next group. So thank you all.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.